I want to explore a little bit more, Ms. Carter Walters, not only what's happening in Chicago, but what's happening in the sanctuary jurisdictions around the country. And I agree with my colleagues, the fact that our Democratic colleagues aren't here, they don't care enough to actually engage, but want to just rely on talking points and misinformation about what's going on in your community and other sanctuary communities. It's a telling development here today, but it's consistent, in my experience, with their attitude about the violence, the crime, the drugs that occurred in communities all across our country, but particularly in sanctuary communities. So, in your experience, does the activities of illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities, does it focus on the gated communities, the areas of the affluent and the well-heeled, or rather does it focus on vulnerable minority communities, for example?
Yes, it's focused on the black communities, the vulnerable communities, exactly my community, and they were placed all in our buildings. So the place that happened where the ICE raid happened on 75th and South Shore Drive, Trendiagua had taken over that building, and the fake news failed to mention that prior to that, a couple of months earlier, that one of those Trendiagua gang members had executed another illegal alien, shot him in the head, and buried his body in concrete in one of those apartment buildings on 75th and South Shore Drive. But they didn't show that. All the fake news showed was ICE officers coming into the building and lying, saying that they're arresting American citizens. Well, when you saturate our communities, American citizens community, with Trendiagua and illegal alien gang members, then what do you think that's going to happen? Then when ICE come in and have to do the raid to get them out of our communities because that's what we wanted and that's what we voted for, then you're going to have American citizens that's going to have to be detained for a minute so they can separate us and make sure we are safe. And I just want to commend the officers because they did a phenomenal job. They made sure that no one was hurt, no American was killed, or they didn't put our lives in danger. They actually helped us. And what the Democratic Party did, Mayor Brandon Johnson did, was put our life in danger when he saturated our community in apartment buildings with illegal alien gang criminals.
Now, Trendiagua is a violent Venezuelan gang, correct?
Yes.
And you're saying in the absence of law enforcement by local and state officials in places like Illinois, Chicago, Illinois, that they pretty much rule the roost in those communities. They can do basically whatever they want to do with impunity.
Yes, because the police officers are told to stand down, just like you saw when they were blocking ICE officers in, and the police chief told them to stand down. They wouldn't even allow officers to help federal officers, ICE officers. They wouldn't even help them. So you can imagine what it's like for just American citizens, regular citizens, what we have to deal with when we call the police and complain about what's happening in our communities with illegal aliens. We don't get no help. The police come and they say it's nothing they can do about it because they have stand down orders.
So not only are the immigration laws not being enforced, it's actually worse than that. Local law enforcement in these sanctuary jurisdictions are told don't cooperate, even when the life, property, and of American citizens is being jeopardized by those illegal immigrants who are not being detained and not being deported. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Cathell, thank you to the Washington Examiner for allowing you to come testify today. and I know you're an investigative reporter, not a political advocate, so but we need accurate information so Congress can decide what the proper policies may be. And I agree with Senator Moody, we need to do even more to make sure that the federal taxpayer or the state taxpayer is not funding organizations which encourage or facilitate attacks on law enforcement, including ICE and CBP officers. But you mentioned in your remarks the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles, and what's the acronym for that?
Charla.
Okay, and it sounds like a pretty benign organization, but how are they funded? Again, is this a combination of sources, both tax dollars to these so-called NGOs, non-government organizations that are providing services to people who are in the country illegally, or is it more than that?
In addition to tax dollars, Charla also receives funding through Act Blue. It has a standing campaign on Act Blue, which is the Democratic Party's primary fundraising platform.
Wait, now that's news to me. Act Blue is an internet-based fundraising program which allows individuals to contribute money to Democratic candidates for office. But are you saying that the Coalition for Humane Immigration Rights of Los Angeles also raises money on this political fundraising website?
Yes, many NGOs have active campaigns on Act Blue.
Well, that's news to me, but we will certainly look into it. I think, Sheriff Boyd, let me go back. Even though, as Senator Cruz pointed out, the border is far more secure than it has been in years, there's still a lot of people in the country that don't belong here because they've simply thumbed their nose at our laws and committed various offenses against American citizens and even other illegal immigrants who've been in the country. But I know that on October the 1st, your office and the Splendora Police Department helped ICE locate and arrest an illegal alien female from Mexico who was wanted for intentional homicide in her home country. Could you talk a little bit about that particular case? I think it's a matter of public record, so maybe you can just fill in some of the details.
Yes, sir. We sent some of our folks up to assist ICE in the Houston office to go out into the field and help them out with conducting investigations and identifying and tracking down people that are in the country illegally. One of the individuals that they wanted to track down was a female from Mexico who was wanted for homicide. If I'm not mistaken, she murdered her boyfriend in the front yard of their house. And she had escaped to the United States of America to avoid prosecution. She was here for some time, and in 2024, she was actually apprehended, but the Biden administration ordered her to be released back into the United States instead of deporting her for the Interpol warrant that existed for her murder.
Now, why would they do that?
Your guess is as good as mine, but I assume because those were the people they really wanted to bring into this country. So chaos brings opportunity for more control. So why not have people here that cause chaos? But we were able to locate her and get her identified at a house in the Colony Ridge area, which, of course, Colony Ridge is a community in Texas that is known for a high concentration of people who are gathered here illegally in the country. We're able to get her and take her into custody, and so turned her over to the federal agencies. So under this administration, she will no longer be roaming the streets of Texas as a wanted murderer.
I'd like for you to expand a little bit on some of your earlier testimony about the connection between the cartels, which are the criminal organizations that operate, in this case, in Mexico, some of them in Central and South America as well. I once heard somebody explain what their business model is, and they were called commodity agnostic. Could you explain what that means to you?
Yes, sir. Basically, if it will make them money, they are willing to do it. They really don't care. They have no conscience. There is no right or wrong in the cartels world. There is only making money and having power within Mexico. And so that is what they are after. It doesn't matter if it is illicit tobacco products, which is a big deal for the cartels, not only in the United States, but in Canada. But if it's stolen vehicles, which in the state of Texas, under the Biden administration, we went from about 60,000 stolen vehicles a year to over 100,000 vehicles stolen a year in an effort to support the smuggling operations of the cartels. Doesn't matter if it's drugs, if it's people, whatever is going to make them money is what they're going to do. Illegal gambling, many of the 8-liners that we have, the gambling rooms that we have across the United States have connectivity to the cartels as part of their money laundering organizations.
And of course, that includes, and you've covered this, but just to emphasize, it also includes smuggling things like fentanyl, which has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans over the years, that primarily comes from Mexico, and making money with the drugs, but also human trafficking. Every individual that they smuggle across the border, they get paid, right?
That is absolutely correct. They get paid an upfront fee, but they also get paid additional fees while they're here in the United States. And as I've articulated before, we found that it takes about 8 to 13 years for people to pay off that debt once they're here. One of the things that Senator Moody touched on was about our enemies laughing at us. But that goes right along with, the cartels have been doing the same thing for quite some time. And you bring up fentanyl, you'll notice that our fentanyl deaths have drastically reduced under the Trump administration. The fentanyl coming in this country is drastically reduced, not just because of the fact that Border Patrol has really tightened up the border across the United States and Mexico, but also the fact that the cartels, our intelligence tells us the cartels have curtailed their fentanyl production because they're afraid that the administration may come into Mexico and come after them as a result of killing so many Americans. And so all the cartel is doing right now is they're buying their time. And if they can get to a point to where Trump is going to be out of office and we're going to have a weak administration, they will immediately fire back up the fentanyl production, and we will see the same tragedy happening over again if we don't fix this problem right now. Now is our opportunity to defund and dismantle the cartels, and if we don't take advantage of it, it's our own fault.
So I think sometimes people think that illegal immigration and smuggling of drugs stops at the border, but you mentioned the logistical support that other criminal organizations and gangs, for example, provide. What happens once the drugs are smuggled in the United States through this logistical support that you mentioned?
You have to look at it.
And is this isolated in any geographic area, or is it nationwide?
It's pervasive. It's all the way across our nation. You got to look at the new generation Jalisco cartel is in, I believe, 56 countries at this point in time. But when it comes to the distribution of product, they're pervasive all across the United States and Mexico. They have cemented their organization, solidified their business model. Look at them like you would look at a large department store across the United States. They have employees, they have contract employees, they have distribution networks all throughout the United States. It's like a spider web, and that's the problem. We have to deny them their logistical capacity to conduct their business here in the U.S. if we're going to get rid of the cartels.
Well, for example, Ms. Carter Walters, I know in Chicago, I either read in the paper or I see on TV or social media the number of violent deaths and murders that occur in Chicago on a regular basis over the weekend. But Sheriff Boyd, would you say that a significant number, some or most or all, perhaps maybe not all, of the criminal activity, including violent deaths in places like Chicago, are tied to illegal drug trafficking?
Absolutely. And if you look across the board in law enforcement, what we know in law enforcement is this, that at least 95% of all of the Class 1 crimes in the United States of America that are committed, that's your burglary, robbery, sexual assault, homicide, those things are tied directly to the Mexican cartels and the products they push into this country, because people commit crimes based off of greed, based off of their addiction, and based off of territorial disputes. Those things across the United States, doesn't matter where you at, tie right back to Mexico.
So I think sometimes people want to differentiate or distinguish between local criminal conduct, and particularly by gangs and the like. But what you're saying is there's a direct connection or even a pipeline for the criminal conduct of the cartels in places like Mexico and what happens in places like Chicago. And I suppose that these organizations, they fight for market share and fight even among themselves. And is that in part responsible for the gun deaths that you see in places like Chicago on a regular basis?
It is based off of those markets that are going to have a higher value. You're going to have organized crime come in and try to vie for the rights of those territories. And sometimes the only way to get those rights pulled away from one organization is to take them out, and you'll see a lot of that violence. But like I said, that crime is tied directly back to Mexico. If somebody breaks into your house tonight, they're probably trying to feed an addiction probably to drugs that they got from a dealer who works for an organization that is a subcontractor for a contractor that works directly for the Mexican cartels. So most of our major crime leads right back to Mexico.
So you really can't separate domestic crime and law enforcement from what's happening at the border and by virtue of these criminal organizations that we call cartels.
They are one and the same.
Well, let me thank all of you for your willingness and courage to testify. You can tell that this topic is not universally popular because sometimes the truth hurts. People don't want to hear it. And rather than engage in reasoned debate and discussion and trying to drill down to what are the facts and what are the is disinformation, they just decide to ignore it altogether and stick their head in the sand. And unfortunately, you've seen some of that here today. But I very much appreciate all of you being willing to come and having the courage to tell us what we need to hear in order to help make our community safe. And I know sometimes President Trump gets criticized for dispatching the National Guard or other federal law enforcement officials to some of these communities to quell the violence and to back up and assist local law enforcement. But it strikes me that the reaction by the residents of those communities is much like that expressed by Mayor Bowser here in Washington, D.C., when she welcomed the National Guard coming in and backing up local law enforcement, and it's had a dramatic impact and reduction on crime, including carjackings, assaults, and robbery and murder in the District of Columbia. And why it is that political leaders, the governors and mayors in some of these places like Illinois, ignore that and somehow hide behind these well-funded organizations which help sponsor and encourage and facilitate this demonstrations like we've seen against ICE doing the job of enforcing the law that Congress has passed. If people have a disagreement with the law, then there is a forum for them to come and talk about that and to petition their elected representatives to change the law. But these are laws that have been passed on a bipartisan basis by Congress, and these heroic law enforcement officials are doing that in communities all across the country, and they don't deserve to be vilified or attacked or assaulted or even criticized, I believe, for doing the job we've actually asked them to do. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate your time and your testimony. We're going to leave the record open for a short while here in case there are any other questions that members of the committee may have, and they may come your way, so keep an eye out for those if that happens. I know frequently we have conflicting committee assignments and other activities, so not even some senators who want to be here could be here, so you may well see those follow-up questions for the record. So thank you very much. This hearing's adjourned.